Our movement is for social equality and social normality. That's it. There is an attack on transgender people in our society in the year 2024. And they are doing a great job of getting their hateful message out. It is spreading across our society. Housing people without dignity, there's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for us in the richest nation this planet has ever seen to have a prison system that treats people with inhumane methods. Don't judge a society by the riches that they accumulate. Judge a society by how they treat their imprisoned people. Hello, and thank you for joining me. It's Brandi's World. I'm Brandi Beckett. I am a transgender activist and a dynamic public speaker. And today, we are taking another look at the podcast Generation Indoctrination, the Transgender Battle, which is brought to us by the Christian Post and hosted by Brandi Showalter. So in today's look at their podcast, we are examining their bonus episode for season 1, which is a look at the prison systems here in the United States. And also they looked at a prison system in Canada too. And they interviewed some, I don't know if they were current inmates or former inmates of those facilities. So they titled it Bonus. Okay. Biological men in women's prisons with a question mark. The insane and terrifying situation plaguing female inmates. It is 28 minutes long, and thus far, this will be our third attempt to finish this episode. I don't listen ahead. I want my reactions to be authentic when I hear what's coming out of these people's mouths. So we're going to go on this journey together. You and I, we're going to listen to the last 11 minutes of their bonus episode for season 1. But don't worry. Apparently they have 2 more seasons. They just started releasing episodes for season 3. So we're going to get through season 2 as well. And then we're going to get to season 3. Hopefully. We can do it. I'm sure we can do it. Okay, let's hear what they have to say.
Led Heather to conduct a survey, asking the women in prison just what it's like inside.
Read you a quote that I got back on the survey from one of the women. And it goes, I lived with a biological male for many months where I watched him have sex with numerous different women, sexually assault a woman in my unit, throw urine and feces at women from another living unit, and expose himself to the women in our unit. He would prey on the young 20-year-old girls in our unit, making them feel uncomfortable to the point where we felt we had no choice but to keep our doors locked at all times.
This is why people like Amy, Amanda, and Heather are speaking out. Amy noted that though some might accuse her of hate or bigotry, all she wants to do is simply tell the truth and expose the atrocities. Among those atrocities, the prison system is also doling out cross-sex hormones to the inmates.
Anyone who is even remotely masculine with a low ponytail or anything is asked if they want to get on testosterone.
With a low ponytail. So you just exist and you have a ponytail, a low ponytail. Let's see. How many people have ponytails? Have you ever been to a bikers convention like they have in Laughlin and Daytona and Sturgis up in, I think that's North or South Dakota, one of the Dakotas. So they have all of these masculine, as we like to call masculine in our society. Those guys we picture right away. How many of them have ponytails? So when those guys, I'm sure all of the biker community, maybe a couple might be in the prison system, right? There might be a couple. And when those people get in the prison systems with their long ponytails, just freshly off of their motorcycle, just stripped away for their vest and their issued their new prison stuff, are they automatically asked if they're going to need some HRT, some hormone replacement therapy? You have long hair. You must need hormone replacement therapy. I don't think that works that way. Sorry, Amy, I believe her name is. Sorry, Amy, I don't think it really works that way. Oh, goodness, but that is kind of funny. All right, so I'm going to let him speak a little bit more before I come in with some more of my opinion. Let's hear what else Amy has to say.
It's the process of getting on testosterone is fast, and it's much more accessible than anything else. You'll get on testosterone before you can get a mammogram or an x-ray for a broken bone. Obviously, this has to be part of an agenda because...
Oh, I was wrong. No, she's talking about women with short hair. Oh, I thought she was talking about like at men's prisons, if they have long hair, they want to give them hormone replacement therapy. But no, it's just as silly. Sorry, I was mistaken, Amy. You're talking about in the women's prison system, if someone doesn't have long hair, if they have shorter hair, then they're automatically asked if they want a hormone replacement therapy? If they want to go on to T? That's weird. Do you have short hair, Amy? I don't know. I just think there's a little bit more to that story, isn't there? And how would you know what medical treatments people are receiving without violating confidentiality of doctor patients when they get their medicines? How are you as a cohort inmate privy to this information? That's interesting. I don't know. Maybe Amy has these special access to people's medications and why and how they need it. But okay, now that I corrected myself, let's continue to hear what Amy has to tell us.
Why else would it be so excessive? Some women have even said, I'm getting on testosterone so that I can protect myself. I got to get strong. I'm old. How am I gonna survive in here?
I'll let you all in a little secret. All humans have testosterone and estrogen within their system. Some humans have glands that are producing hormones that are more favored, pushing more androgen than estrogen. And some have glands that push out more estrogen than androgen. But estrogen and androgen, the estradiol or estrogen, like what we would call hormones for women, right? Those hormones are also including some androgen. So you will get T in your system. All women have T in their system to some level. So increasing that T, not necessarily meaning that you are anything about your gender identity. You could just be adapting and adjusting your hormone levels. Doctors do that all the time. People, when they get a little bit older, have a hard time regulating their hormonal distribution throughout their body. Have you ever heard of menopause? That's because your body's not producing the hormones like it once did, and it shifts in the distribution of these hormones at the different levels of hormones. So yeah, that's very natural, and getting a replacement to try to adjust where your hormone levels should be or where you want them to be, the desired level that makes you the best you, well, sure, that doesn't necessarily have to be only for trans people. Cis people have their hormones adjusted all the time as well. So this is medicine. And are you saying you don't want inmates to get medicine based on who they are? Or are you saying inmates shouldn't get medicine? Or you think only inmates you think should get medicine they need? Because I don't know what it is. But let's see what else. What else do you have to say, Amy?
And that's not something anyone should ever have to think about or actually do.
Heather expressed a similar sentiment, revealing some of the horrific ways incarcerated women told her they are trying to defend themselves from men.
Some of the things that women were telling me were that it was like fighting real men. So they resorted to putting rocks in socks to be able to defend themselves.
Oh my goodness, this is the first time that's ever happened in a prison yard. No woman in any prison in the entire history of women prisons has anyone felt like the strength of another inmate was way beyond theirs, and they're threatened and they're going to have to use rocks to defend themselves. I don't think that has to be a trans person to be in that, to be the person you're scared of. There are plenty of women I see all the time. I'm like, oh my God, their muscle mass is going to dominate me if I try to do a strength test against them. All the time. Yes, you don't have to be a man to be impressively big in stature. Women are big and strong, and you don't have to be a trans woman to be big and strong. Plenty of trans women are kind of small and not that strong either. I think you're just scared of trans women. If you're being honest, this one's Heather, right? Heather, if you're being honest, you're just kind of scared of trans women because you don't understand or know or empathize with what they would go through. And granted, you are being exposed. I'm gonna say that maybe you were not aware of any other trans people in your life, and the first time you get exposed to a trans person is someone in the prison system who's been locked up there because they've demonstrated they are monstrous in our society. Wow, yeah, that's scary. If the only representation you have for someone as a community is someone who is monstrous in their behaviors and in their actions, you may form a bend and a prejudice against that group based on that one individual. I'm not saying that's right to do. I'm just saying I kind of get that. I kind of understand where that's coming from. I hope I never do that. I hope I never in a position where I represent a whole group of people based on the experience I had with one individual within that group, because that would not be fair to the group. Now, I recognize that, but I don't think everyone does recognize that. So I want you to rethink. Heather, if you're listening to this, not all transgender people are represented by that one individual you've been, or maybe you've met a few individuals in there. Prison systems are where we keep the people who we don't think belong in our society, interacting with our society. We put them away in the prison systems based on the past demonstrations of how they interact with society and the behaviors they do when they are among other people in society. That's why prison systems exist in principle, right? So if you encounter some very awful people in a prison system, yes, that sucks. I'm not representative of that. I'm not defending those individuals for their actions. I do not condone or even applaud their actions if they're being violent, if they are being monstrous. I want monstrous people out of our society, but I also want, whether they're monstrous or not monstrous, whether they're the perfect innocent person who got put in the prison system or they're absolutely a monster, we know 100% for sure that they are an awful, monstrous, harmful person. All of them should be treated with dignity and humane methods. Because we as a society should be better than housing people in inhumane ways, housing people without dignity. There's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for us in the richest nation this planet has ever seen to have a prison system that treats people with inhumane methods and without dignity. There's no excuse for that. Blaming your prison problems on the trans women being housed in the women's prisons is not going to do anything but create biased and hateful bends against transgender women. We are already in enough danger without even more pile-on onto us. There is an attack on transgender people in our society in the year 2024, and it's been raging for the last few years, and I don't see it calming down anytime soon. Great philosophers like to point out, don't judge a society by the riches that they accumulate. Judge a society by how they treat their imprisoned people.
Told me how she was cornered in the laundry room and pushed up against the wall, and the guy tried to shove his tongue down her throat. Another woman was sexually assaulted in the bathroom and was taken out to the rape crisis center. Women were talking about being threatened with murder or assault. Others talked about just not being able to walk from the shower to their bedroom anymore without feeling like they were being watched.
The initial aim of Amy's organization, Woman to Woman, was to help women find resources after their prison sentences were complete. She never thought she'd be having to defend women from the aforementioned issues. And she can't believe that California politicians signed off on this policy.
It's a nightmare. I don't know if they know how to read or if that's a requirement to be an elected official in the state of California, because it's quite clear. The language is quite clear. There is no way you can deny knowing what this was going to do. Even if you did think that all these people that were transferring in were victims, just knowing that it was not a requirement to get sexual reassignment surgery in order to transfer should have automatically been an indication of the insanity of the bill. So I wrote to Maxine.
The bill they're talking about is about dignity. It's housing people in prisons with dignity, recognizing their gender identity, and allowing them to express that and to be in an environment that matches their identity, not their label assignment, not based on their sexual characteristics. The bill is talking about gender identity. And your identity is not dictated by your sexual characteristics. Your identity is within you. It is a source within you that you're the only person who has access to it. So no one can come in and tell you this is your gender identity. They can tell you, here's a label we can place on you. Do you agree with that label or do you not agree with that label? That's on you. But no one can ever dictate your gender identity because they cannot gain access to it. There is no way for an outside person to gain access to your identity because it's inside of you. Just as in, no one from the outside can dictate your handedness because it's inside of you. You cannot find a physical source for either one of those sources, could you? You couldn't point and go, I'm left-handed because this freckle on my forehead. I'm left-handed because because this finger's slightly bigger than this finger. No, none of that equals. No physical thing you can point to that's going to equal your handedness. You can only inquire and you can only discover your handedness. And it can only be discovered by the self, not the outside world, only within the self. Just as your gender identity, it cannot be discovered by an outside source. It can only be described and discovered from within the self. So, yes. You do not have to do anything to your genitals to express your gender identity, because your gender identity is not linked to or yoked to your genitals. So who cares? Why are you focusing on someone's genitals so much? It's not who they are. It's not their identity. Allow them to express their identity. And when they express it, don't be a bigot and a hateful person about it. Be an empathetic person and applaud them for expressing their inner self. Even the criminals and the prisoners in our society should be able to express their identity. Why are you trying to make that so challenging and hard? Are you not American? I'm assuming we talked to some Canadian people, but I am an American. And I'm going to talk about American prison systems. American prison systems should uphold American ways. And American values are individual values. We value the individual. We lift up the individualism within our society. We do it across the board. And we tell our young generations, you can be anything you want as an American as long as you apply yourself and work hard. How can you be anything you want if Americans are not allowing you to express who you are? You cannot be anything you want to be unless you discover who you are. Isn't that part of it? Being transgender means you discovered your gender identity from within and you're expressing it. You're showing society, yourself, everyone around you, at least I am pulling out my expression of my gender identity. You are looking at my expression. You're not looking at my identity. You're looking at my expression. And the expression is simply a reflection of my gender identity. You're not seeing it. You cannot see my identity. You can only see a reflection of that identity. And that reflection, that is what we call gender expression. So you're trying to criticize and stifle gender expression and erase someone's gender identity when you should be doing an American thing and allowing that person to discover their gender identity and express that identity to whomever they want to. Isn't that an American thing to do? Express who you are? That's what I've been taught my entire life.
Waters, Dianne Feinstein, I got letters from them that were exactly the same thing, that they stand in solidarity with their trans siblings and they would continue to defend their rights. It does get really exhausting. It does get difficult. And I know that it's going to get harder. And I knew this was a really, really heavy cross I picked up when I picked it up. But I continually remind myself every day that no matter...
Oh, Heather, it's not a heavy cross you picked up. It's a toxic cross you picked up. You picked up an archaic argument. You picked up a battle that you're fighting someone's identity. You're fighting against someone to exist in society. We've seen these battles before. They happened in the 1960s and 70s and still kind of continue. They've happened in the mid-19th century, in the 1850s and 60s. We've seen these battles. People tried to erase someone's identity as an American human. We've seen it in the 1920s fighting for half of our population the right to vote. There were people who stood against these movements as well, and they were holding the same toxic cross that you are trying to pick up, Heather. They are carrying the same toxic arguments you are trying to forward, Heather. Look to other social movements and see what arguments were the opposite of this movement that we consider a great movement in our country. Every great movement in our country had its opposition. And if you're making the same arguments as the opposition to our great movements, that reflects more on your argument than our movement. Our movement is for social equality and social normality. That's it. And we deserve that on all levels of our society, in the prison systems, in the workforce, in our hospital systems. We deserve to have equality across the board. We are Americans. We are humans. Quit trying to treat us like we're neither. And then let's continue. You're talking about Feinstein and some other California politicians who were applauding a bill that was based on human dignity and human rights. So let's continue that you don't like human dignity and rights applied to trans people.
How bad it gets, and no matter how much people talk bad about me or try and slander me, it's not half as bad as one day that they're spending in this situation. So I can't be weak and I can't give up, because nothing that I'm going through is even as close as what they're experiencing. What some of them have to think about is going to be the rest of their life.
In the interest of fairness, I emailed 2 officials at the California Department of Corrections, specifically inquiring about the hormones and the medical protocols within the prison clinics. I also asked about the experiences of female inmates living with men, and about how many men are expected to be approved for transfer in the weeks and months to come. But I received no response.
What did you expect, Brandon? Did you expect officials to come back with the medical records of people? You're asking about someone's medication. What are you thinking? Why? Why in the first place? Why do you care so deeply about this?
Wonder why storied organizations like Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch and others in the human rights community are so silent on these issues. I asked Amanda, who is a lawyer but does not function as an attorney in her advocacy role with Keep Prisons Single-Sex, doesn't the Geneva Convention prohibit the housing of prisoners of both sexes in the same facilities? Shouldn't that standard apply domestically? And how does the practice of forcing women to share close quarters with men and...
You see how they're switching back from gender to sex? When they want to make their point of here's the difference. They're going to say sex, and then they're going to say we need to protect the gender, the women. That's how they erase it, right? So you don't allow the trans women to fall into the label of women because you don't allow them beyond their sexual characteristics. That's where your argument falls apart, Brandon. Because you keep switching to sexual characteristics and equating that with gender identity. Those two are not equated. Those two do not exist for each other. They're different concepts. They're different things. Think about it, Brandon. Let me do a thought experiment with you, Brandon. Let's say for whatever reason, you are, God forbid, the God you believe in forbid that you get in an accident. It happens. Car accidents happen. If you and I were driving together, we're getting lunch, because I would love to talk with you, Brandon, because I think you're interesting guy. I think you're misled on a few subjects. But let's say we're having lunch, and then some crazy guy pulls out in front of us, and we get in this terrible accident. I break my arm. I break my hip, because my hip's kind of bothering me. It probably will break. And oh my God, you got mangled as well, and you no longer have your genitals attached to your body. Now, you and I are in the hospital recovering from our make-believe accident and our thought experiment, right? So we're recovering. I'm in cast, my legs up in traction, and you're in the bed next to me, and your penis and testicles are just wiped away with that horrible accident that happened. But other than that, you're kind of okay. I mean, you got a lot of bruising and soreness, but you're okay, but you no longer. And now, while we're in that room, some people heard I was in that room, and they really don't like what I do, my activism. So they're kind of bigoted people, and they're going to come in the room, and they discover that you no longer have genitals. Should we let them say that you're less than man you are before the accident? How much do your genitals inform everyone else about your gender identity, Brandon? Would your gender identity have to change? I think so. I think, Brandon, I have a feeling if I asked you what percentage of man you consider yourself to be, you'd probably be like 100%. And I'd be like, oh, awesome, 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 awesome. And I'll be like, after this make-believe accident of ours and my broken arm, hip, and your genitals gone, I ask you, can we re-examine and take another look at that 100%? How much is it going to change? Is it going to be 88% man? Is it going to be 50% man? What percentage of man? How many percentage of men would you lose after losing your testicles and penis in a horrible accident? How much gender identity would you lose? Exactly, none. Not a single thing would change with your gender identity because your sexual characteristics are not dictating your gender identity. You don't have to have the junk between your legs to inform you of your gender identity because you don't look to that source. That is not the source of your gender identity. The source of your gender identity is from within you. Hopefully that my little thought experiment, hopefully that helped you a little bit, Brandon. Okay. Quit focusing on someone's genitals. It's not their gender identity, is my point.
Prison, how does that not contravene every sane principle of human rights law?
Well, there's a few questions in there. The reason there isn't an outcry from the human rights community is that they have largely been captured by this ideology, which is not just accepted at international entities like the United Nations, but is promoted by them. They have designated an independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity, and he seems to view his mandate, and he's probably not wrong, his mandate is to enshrine self-ID, gender identity throughout every country. And they issue reports which describe objections to rendering single-sex spaces mixed-sex, including prisons. They describe that as being part of a colonial bias, that women's concerns about this.
Yes, exactly. It's a colonial bias because the colonial culture, what we call Western culture, has the concept of gender as a binary concept. But not everywhere the colonists went did the other humans already existing in that land who already had cultural constructs of their gender identities. Not all of them had it as a binary. Not every human culture thinks of gender as a binary. Binary gender labeling is not a human species thing. It's a cultural construct. That, granted, there are many, many cultures who go by a binary, but not all of them. That's why it is a colonial thing. When those colonists got to certain lands, they discovered, oh my goodness, there's lots of these people who have a different concept of gender than we do. They don't have it in a binary. They have it in multiple categories based on multiple different things. But it is not a human species thing to have a binary concept of gender labeling. It's simply not.
Aren't based in fact, they're based in prejudice, they're anecdotal. So there's no help coming from international human rights organizations who have...
Does that tell you something? They're like, hey, my argument and my battle and my fight, yeah, we try to get the human rights people on our side, and they're like, we're not going anywhere near your argument. We're not supporting you one bit. Does that tell you something about your side you're on? The battleground you're standing on is like, yeah, they're not going to help us because we don't really accommodate with the human rights. Think about your argument, people. Come on, I'm not the one broadcasting this podcast. Y'all are doing it. You're like walking right up to the edge of going, hey, we have very bad arguments and they're archaic and we shouldn't be making them. And you're almost to that point where you recognize that and you just back away and really like your argument and really feel comfortable and you're biased and prejudiced against trans people. So, okay.
Been captured like this, but fundamentally, your assessment is obviously the correct one. This is a violation of the Eighth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. This is in conflict with the United Nations' own standards of minimum rules for prisons, which are known as the Mandela rules. It's in violation of the Geneva Conventions, which don't apply in a non-war dynamic, but were the guiding principles of this portion of the Mandela rules. And aside from all of the sort of legal framework of that, it's just absolute common sense.
And again,
Common sense? Common sense would be to use the identity that someone gives you. Because do you think you can know someone's identity better than that person can know it? Do you value someone's sexual organs, their sexual characteristics, more than that person? Because that's what your argument is saying. Your argument is saying that, hey, we want penises in this housing and we want non-penises in this housing. Because you seem perfectly fine trans women who've already had surgeries. You just seem to be scared of the dangly thing that some women have. Well, not all women have vaginas. Some women have penises. Not all men have penises. And some men have vaginas. Because you don't like their sexual characteristics, you want to violate their human rights, is what I'm hearing. You want to not recognize them as their identity. You want to force them into a box based on their sexual characteristics. And then you want to punish them for having sexual characteristics not align with their gender identity. This is cruel. This is mean. Let people be people.
reiterate, there's also the persistent problem of the general public having a tough time believing that any of this is actually happening right now, today, in our correctional facilities.
I've encountered quite a few people who don't believe me because they know it's wrong. So they don't think that the government would ever make a policy like this. I remember being in prison and talking to my mom on the phone. And I told her that we had men in the prison. And she's like, no way. Like, she didn't believe me. And I'm like, Mom, like, I'm here. I'm telling you that this is happening. But yeah.
Maybe her mom was correcting her. No, wait, you got to get it correct. You have trans women in prison with you. The men's are at a different facility. Sweetie, I know. You're in prison, you're a little stressed out, but you just, maybe that was a conversation. I'm hoping. No, you're right. Probably wasn't. Okay, here we go.
A lot of people not wanting to believe it because they don't think something insane like this would be allowed to go on. But there are a lot of people who, their mantra is trans women are women, and they seem to think that there's no way that men would identify as women just to gain access to women and children. And it blows my mind that they can even think like that with what we...
Wait! Where did that come from? Who is saying that? No one is I'm a trans activist, and well, apparently she thinks she knows how I'm thinking. But I'm telling you, no, I don't want some cis dude in with women and shit. No, I don't want that at all. I want women to be treated as they should be treated, you know? And I want trans women to be recognized as women, because that's what we are. So, yes, trans women should be treated with dignity and respect. That doesn't mean I have anything to do with cis men wanting to violate places they shouldn't be. What kind of a straw man argument is that? I'm not making that argument. No, don't want that at all. I do not want cis men in women's prisons. Trans women who happen to be prisoners should be in women's prisons. That's where they should house the prisoners of women.
know about predators in the world.
In the end, Amanda said people must realize that the decision to move men into women's prisons based on gender identity is creating new problems for women.
Based on gender identity. Move men into women based on gender identity. No, if a man that says gender identity, I'm a man, I'm a cis man, you wouldn't move him into a women's prison. If a person says, I am a woman, I happen to be a trans woman, that's their identity, you move them into a women's prison. I think you actually kind of get this, Brandon, but you're really slick with your words and you like to slip things around so it sounds like it's kind of confusing and whoa, all of these men want to get into women's prisons, but you're saying two things. You're saying men want to get into women's prisons. I agree with you, let's keep men out of women's prisons. But you're also saying, let's deny transgender women from having access to housing that correctly identifies with their identity, right? Those are different things, Brandon.
For women, and they must be reconsidered.
This issue was created for no good reason. Lots of men are vulnerable in men's prisons. There are older men, there are disabled men, there are gay men. There are lots of men vulnerable in the men's prisons, and it is the responsibility of the state to ensure or provide safety for all of these men, however they identify, in the men's prisons.
All of these men, however they identify. So you're not saying all of the men. You're saying if a trans woman identifies as a trans woman, you're saying no. That's still a man, and it should be in a man's prison. Because why should we give that thing dignity and that thing the rights that all the other humans get in the prison system? No. Sounds like pretty close to what you're saying there, lady. I'm a trans woman. There's no guarantee I'm not going to end up in a prison system in the United States. Not because I'm a criminal or anything like that, because the United States has a lot of people in prison systems, and not all of them are guilty of doing crimes. You can end up in a prison system just for numerous reasons in the United States, and that's kind of scary. If for some odd reason I'm caught up in a prison system here in the United States, do you expect them to house me in men's prison housing? That's ridiculous. No. I have an F on my license. I have my F on my passport. Our government recognizes my womanhood.
We don't need to create additional problems for the women's prison.
Indeed, we don't. And some groups are trying to mitigate those newly created
You're the
problems.
best. You're the best I've had interviewing there, Brandon. No, we don't. Just a vague statement like, we don't need problems in women's prisons. No, we don't. Oh, what a brave stance there. The problems in women's prisons vastly outweigh trans women's effect into a prison system. There's far more wrong with the women's prison system than the small percentage of trans women are housed in there. You want to blame problems on the trans women. Problems that have always existed. We've gone through every one of those examples that you brought up thus far. I easily replaced trans woman with just a different woman in the women's prison, and the argument worked exactly the same. It's not trans women, it's your prejudice against trans women that's the problem.
In November of last year, the Women's Liberation Front, a radical feminist group, filed a lawsuit on behalf of 4 incarcerated women, challenging that California law that allows men to self-identify as women or non-binary to be housed in what should be female-only prisons. The Women's Liberation Front is urging the court to overturn this law and declare it unconstitutional. Their multi-pronged case includes the argument that the law violates the 8th Amendment, which subjects incarcerated women to known substantial risks of physical and sexual violence, including consequences such as pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections.
Oh, wouldn't that protect me from going to a men's prison? Do you think if I walk into a men's prison looking like this, there's a higher risk of me having physical body harm? What's the odds of me being raped in a men's prison housing system? Pretty freaking high, I would say. Shouldn't that Eighth Amendment be protecting me, not going against me? Or do you not care about me? Because if you care about my well-being, if you care about my existence as an American citizen, if you care about my existence as a fellow human being, if you ask, what would Jesus do? You're going to be protecting my rights with that Eighth Amendment, not trying to use it against me and people like me. You're just being mean, people. It's not cool.
And the associated psychological distress and terror. This is, they say, cruel and unusual punishment.
Yes.
At present, hundreds of men have applied for transfers to the women's prisons, and dozens have already been transferred. The remaining requests appear to be pending, and there is ample reason to think that at least some of them will be approved.
You created monstrous situations, you get people frightened, and then you say, ooh, trans people are coming. They're coming after you. The trans women are coming to your prisons to overtake your prisons. The trans people are coming to make your kids all into trans. That's what you want. Again, let's go back to our demonstration of how gender is inside you. I cannot change your gender no matter what I do, Brandon. I cannot. I cannot ask you a question that is going to change your gender identity. I cannot show you a picture that is going to change your gender identity. I cannot read you a story that is going to change your gender identity. Nor can I do that for any other person. I cannot change anyone's identity because the identity is within them. I can say, hey, why don't you look inside yourself and ask yourself what your gender identity is? Because about 95 to 98% of the time someone does that, it's going to be in a complete accord with their gender assignment, their gender identity, and their gender expression, and their gender performance. Most people are going to look inside themselves and go, yes, it's exactly. I see that gender concept within myself, and when I express it, oh, I can match it up pretty closely, and it just happens to be the assignment that was placed onto me. That's what cis is. That's what a cis person is. Most people are cis. Not everyone. Not everyone is cis. Some of us look inside, ask the questions about our gender identity, and realize, oh my God, that doesn't align with this assignment I was given, this label I was given, this box I was put into with all of these attributes of what's supposed to be the expression of my gender identity. When I look inside myself, I do not see that in that box that was given to me and labeled to me and assigned to me when I came into this society. When I came into this world as a little baby, I was dropped in a box. That box stayed with me, and it put more attributes in that box from the society around me and the pressures, and then I had to fit into that box. When I look inside my gender identity, I don't see it fitting in that box. So I don't put it in that box anymore. I express my inner identity. I express it. And my expression happens to fit kind of nicely in our concept of the other box of gender that we culturally created for our society. Right? So a lot of these attributes, the way I wear my hair, I like wearing my hair like this, my shirt, my pants, my appearance, all of this is my expression. And my expression, as I said before, is reflection. But the identity in there, when I express it, it aligns with that other box. I'm fortunate in that way. And that is me. That's my womanhood in that box. My womanhood is coming from inside. And when I express it, it fits into that box. If I ever end up in a prison system, dignity and humanity should be applied to me by my imprisoners. And that means recognizing my identity. Not necessarily approving of my expression, because who do I have to approve my expression to, Brandon? Does it have to meet your approval for me to be treated with dignity and humane methods? Who do I have to impress with my expression? Because the way I see it, the only one I have to impress is myself. I am a woman. I express my womanhood. I am trans because I was assigned a different label. It does not take away from my womanhood expression. And don't try to be cruel to me or other trans women because you don't understand us or you don't like the way we express our inner self. Don't deny us our inner self. Don't deny us our expression. Don't deny us to be us because you don't understand us. All right, y'all, I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm getting all preachy now, so until next time, I'm going to leave y'all like I always do with this message. But before I go, if you've made it this far in this video, please like, subscribe, and share this and my other videos. Let's try to build up my platform. If you appreciate what I'm trying to do here, the messages I'm trying to bring to general masses, let's get these videos out so the general masses can see them. Thank you. And as always, love yourself, but more importantly, like yourself and treat people the way they want to be treated. Bye-bye for now.